So the real shock came with people's reaction to the article. We just did a study that found 50% of Americans believe that if they let their kid play at their park, age 10, 50% think that they would be kidnapped. I think what has happened, and the thing that interests me most, is this fundamental shift in literally how we think about life. And it's become really dark. The only thing that I've seen that changes parents is letting their kids do something without them watching. And then the kid comes home and the kid is proud and you're proud. What the culture does is it takes a very normal, safe circumstance, which is a kid in bed at night, and turns it into a life or death situation that you must monitor very closely. Don't prepare the path for your kid, prepare your kid for the path.
First of all, this is my voice. I'm Tim Green, and I have ALS. But this podcast isn't about ALS. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. I'm a father of 5, married for over 35 years, a New York Times best-selling author, an NFL first-round pick, and a practicing attorney. This is Nothing Left Unsaid, where my son Troy and I sit down with extraordinary people for raw, honest conversations about life, its toughest trials, and greatest triumphs. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Lenore Skenazy, thank you so much for joining us today. You're a journalist, best-selling author, and the founder of the Free Range Kids movement. Your work has challenged millions of parents to rethink fear, independence, and what it really means to raise resilient kids. It's an honor to have you here with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you, both Greens. The green eye.
As I've got 4 young kids, so I got to pay attention to this episode.
4 young kids, you're already doing it right, because you can't possibly watch all of them at once. You're set. Have a couple more and you'll be me.
Lenore, before we get into your work, I'd love to go back to that day you put your 9-year-old son alone on the subway. Can you describe what that moment felt like, not as America's worst mom, but simply as a parent trusting her child?
Well, first of all, I like the way you phrase that, because, of course, at that point, I didn't realize I was America's worst mom. So you're asking me to remember how something felt that I've talked about a lot, and it was 17 years ago, so I'm going to sort of fake it, because I don't really remember how it felt. I just remember that our son had been asking me and my husband if we would take him someplace and let him find his own way home by subway in New York, where we live. And that finally we had a free Sunday, and I said, okay, let's just do it today. And it was a very fun day because first we went to McDonald's, which is always fun. And then I took him to a really fancy department store, Bloomingdale's in New York, because I wanted to be someplace he hadn't been before, and we don't shop at Bloomingdale's. And then we talked to everybody there, which is something that we both enjoy. And then I left him saying, okay, your job is to find your way home now, as you have asked us. And I'll go home another way. I took a bus home. And I don't recall feeling worried or nervous at that point, because it was during the day. It was a Sunday. It was it's a safe neighborhood, and he was going to our neighborhood, which is considered a safe neighborhood. So I think it was just like, cool, all right, the adventure begins. And even when it was over, even after he'd come home and he was so proud and he was excited that he had done something on his own, I'm a newspaper reporter, and I didn't write about it for like 2 months because it didn't strike us as an enormous milestone or a publicity stunt or anything. It was just part of regular life. He's 9 years old now, he can get around. So the real shock came with people's reaction to the article, because I write columns all the time, which reminds me I have one due today. And most of the time they do not cause an international reaction or any reaction. Let's put it that way.
Did he make it back like in a normal time, or did he have any big mistakes, or he made it back pretty easy?
Wait, I'm actually writing myself a note. Don't forget to write column. He made it back in a regular amount of time, and he'd had a little bit of trouble. I mean, he told us later that he'd gone onto the platform and he asked some guy, is this the downtown platform? Because we live downtown from there. And the guy said, no, actually, this is the uptown platform. You got to go up and down. And, we've been in that station a million times. But afterwards, when I went and I thought, it is a slightly confusing station, because there's, I don't know, about 6 different trains that stop there. But, like I said, he speaks the language. We got to remember how much kids can do. You know this. You have 4 kids. How much they can do when you give them a chance to figure things out on their own. It's exhilarating. It's actually, there's nothing people love more than problem solving. I mean, that actually is a fun thing that we love doing. And so he problem solved, and it was not a big deal.
When the headlines began calling you reckless, did you ever second guess yourself even for a moment? Or were you always anchored in the belief that you were right?
Can I say both? I thought I was right, and I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't thought that it was pretty safe and pretty easy. I mean, extremely safe and pretty easy. But, it's impossible not to doubt yourself, even if you think what you're doing is right. And there were times that I did let him do things on his own, and I was scared. Oh, how come he's not home? It's dark already. And you can't not be afraid. But the weird thing about our culture is that it feels like we're being told like you can be a parent and never worry if you only, track them enough and do enough with them or for them. And that seems like selling parents a bill of goods that can't happen. And so we're constantly frustrated. And also, it makes us think that we can spend every second overseeing every second of our kids' lives, and that will make them safe and us happy. And the kids are already pretty safe, even without us always watching them. And it makes us unhappy. And I was trying to think of an analogy for like, why does more surveillance, the opportunity to track kids, the opportunity to see pictures sent home from camp every day, is your kid smiling in the picture? Are they toasting a marshmallow? Are they a little too close to the fire? All the technology that allows us to know our kids' grades immediately in school, on the Spanish test, and were they sitting attentively on the rug in kindergarten? I mean, there's a lot of portals that send us pings about what our kids are doing and how they're acting and how they feel. And you can even tell their temperature from, with certain apps, 7 states away. And I was thinking, why doesn't that make us feel more reassured? All this information. And the analogy I came up with yesterday, see if this works. If not, you're the first and last to hear it, is that it's like if you had a daily MRI. If you had a daily MRI, you would know everything about your body every single day. And wouldn't that reassure you? And I think the answer is no, because there'd always be some weird little spot or something that looked a little different from yesterday. And so you'd be getting all these false positives all the time that would make you worry about things that you otherwise wouldn't worry about at all, that are probably not worth worrying about. And so I think that we're sort of doing daily MRIs on our kids and our relationship with our kids, and it's driving us nuts. Does that analogy work at all?
I think it does. I have a friend who said to me that like the cure to, and this is obviously he's being a little facetious, but the cure to anxiety and depression is like stop looking at the news, because the reality is,
I totally believe that.
like the local news right around you might be relevant, but maybe, but the national news is almost never going to affect your life. And again, I'm being very.
No. There was actually, you're being, in facetiousness is the truth. So if I asked you the worst school shooting in America, you probably wouldn't guess when it was. But it was 1927 or 1928 and I can never remember if it was Wisconsin or Michigan, which is too bad because I'm a Midwesterner myself, originally from Chicago. But some guy was mad about the taxes, and so he planted a bomb in a school. And then when people came to save the kids, he shot them all, and it was horrible. And yet it didn't change the parenting culture at all, because back then you had newspapers. You didn't have much radio, and you certainly didn't have television or the internet. And so by the time the news got out to South Carolina, it was somebody really far away. It's in the Midwest, and it's a couple days ago already, and there's no video with it. There's not even photos with it. And it allowed you the distance that allowed you to breathe. Not that you didn't sympathize with the kids and the families, but that it didn't seem so immediate that it was happening around the corner for you right then. And the thing about the way the brain works is that it works like Google. And if you ask Google to recommend a great taco stand near you, and you give your, your zip code, it'll come up with, 10 taco stands. And these, depending on where you live, maybe not where you are, where I am, there are definitely 10 taco stands, all of them great. And it will list them. And these responses are relevant to my search. But if you ask your brain, is my kid safe, at the bus stop, up will come pictures of, a kid taken in 1979 and a kid taken in 1980, whatever. And because they are so resonant and because they have so much emotion attached to them. And once your brain has given you these search results, there's something called the availability heuristic. Stupidly big word for just the easier it is to picture something, the more relevant and the more likely we think it is. And so with asking like, is my kid safe, or is the world safe? And if you have all of these new pictures from yesterday's news and today's news of the worst things that happened anywhere in the country and the world, of course it's going to seem like nothing is safe enough. And so if you don't want your brain to be giving you those search results of the worst case scenarios in every single day in every single way, you got to dial back on the information that's piling up there.
Yeah, I think that might even be I love the MRI analogy, but I think the news one too, because if you look at the news, it says, Americans are at each other's throats and there's all this problems with racism, sexism, politics, this and other thing. But if I walk outside, I just see a couple of my neighbors and, kids and bikes and people generally happy. And so it is, yeah. But at the same time, too, I'm talking like I'm not a helicopter parent, but I currently am. I'm hoping you can cure me here in the next hour.
Can't your dad cure you? Oh, Dad. I bet you didn't helicopter Troy, did you?
I don't know. Maybe it was I don't know.
I'm waiting to hear. Hang on.
Helicopter. Yeah. We're still we're really close though, so it's hard to tell because like I said, I'm his neighbor, so I never made it very far.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really happy. Awesome. I live in New York and I have two sons. One lives in Connecticut, which is not far, and then one lives in Brooklyn, which you'd think is really close because I'm in Queens. It actually takes forever on the subway because I still take the subway, but I'm glad that they're nearby. I don't know if I want them literally next door, but.
Well, I think I was probably a bit of a helicopter parent. And like you, I also have to say that having family close is the best. Lenore, you were a successful journalist for years before Free Range Kids. Do you think your instinct to challenge cultural narratives came from your reporting background, or is that just who you've always been regardless?
Wow, what a nice question. Nobody ever cares about my years and years and years and years as a reporter. So thanks, Tim. So the reason I became a reporter is because I wanted to do what I'm doing right now, which is just meeting people all the time. And reporting was the excuse to do it because it allows you to go up to talk to anybody. But I also think because I was a reporter in New York City, and I never covered hard news, Troy. I never covered the murders and the fires and the shootings, nothing like that. I was like sort of a fun reporter, as a features reporter. And what I would do oftentimes was take the subway and get off someplace where I saw a lot of people getting off in a neighborhood that I had never been in before. And I wouldn't let myself get back on until I found a story. And so I just met people in all these different neighborhoods and I talked to people hither and yon. And then I did a column for a long time that was so fun and also fed me called Dinner at Your Place, where I would go and have dinner with any Daily News reader who invited me over to their house. And so A, free dinners right and left. B, I got to meet all these different families. The only requirement is they had to be from a country that I hadn't already written about their food about. I was a food reporter. And I think these experiences showed me what my real city was, just like Troy, you were saying, where you go outside and it's so different from the news. Well, when you write stories about people and their families and their food, and you get to know business owners and, people selling stuff on the street, you get this picture of New York City that is extremely wonderful. All these entrepreneurs, all these go-getters, all these people from a million different countries. And so the idea of letting your son go on a subway where they're going to encounter all these people seems like great. These people are nice. Most people would help a child if he needed something. And it didn't strike me as sending him down to murderer's row. So I think my reporting the reporting of meeting real people in my real city. And also, I'm able to, look up statistics, and I could see that of the 25 largest cities in America, New York was the safest, and our crime rate was way down from the early 90s. It's been going down ever since. It's actually, New York is on record to have possibly the safest year ever on record for New York City coming up in terms of violent crime and murder. So, yeah, being a reporter made it much easier, I'd say, for me to see the reality and to let my son be part of it.
On a similar note, you've said we're living in a culture of fear, especially around children. Why do you think we've become so convinced that the world is more dangerous than it really is?
Yeah, Tim, that's a question I ask myself all the time too. How did we get so afraid? And I know for a fact, actually, I'm writing a piece where I have to find the fact that proves that we're more afraid. But for me, the fact that proves it is that when I went to school, which maybe this is true for you, Tim, we might be the same age. When I was 5, I walked to school by myself, kindergarten. And once I turned the corner, of course, my mom couldn't see where I was. There was no tracking. She didn't have a telescope. And then somehow she lived without seeing me again until 3:30 in the afternoon when I came home. And then basically from 4 to 6, she didn't see me again. And yet nobody thought that she was reckless. And somehow I don't think she was racked with fear simply because I was not within, her vision for those hours. So something changed because, well, let me ask Troy, do you feel okay when your kids how old are your kids?
I'm pretty neurotic, so I'm probably not the right one to ask. But my kids are, she's right now 6, 4, 2, and then 10 months, almost basically every 2 years, 7, 5, 3, 1. In
Okay.
6 months, that's what we'll have.
All right. Yeah. So you're in the thick of time when those kids do need, I'd say, a decent amount of supervision, certainly anybody under the 6-year-old. So if your 6-year-old walked to, 2 blocks away, would that be okay?
I'm probably not the right person to ask.
No,
I don't know.
but you're the person I'm asking. Right?
Yeah. I think I look at it as risk reward, and the risk for me of taking, when my daughter walks again, I'm literally my parents' neighbor. When
Mm-hmm.
she walks to their house, I'll watch her turn the corner where I know, where my parents' driveway is, there's a little bend. And if something were to go wrong, it'd be her walking around the corner at the same time as a car coming up. So I watch that corner because my risk in that scenario is 10 seconds to watch her get there. And then it has happened one time in her 6-year life where I said Thea, there's a car, and she probably would have been totally fine and got out of the way anyways. But so I just sit there and I'm so once she rounds that corner, then I'm good with it because it's pretty much a straight shot. But I don't know. Again, if she was walking far, I don't know. It's like a risk reward thing. If something were to happen, it's she's like my whole world, and it scares me. But I also know it's crazy to. We don't have anything apps or tracking, and she doesn't have a phone or anything like that. And we drop her at school and camps and stuff like that and pick her up at the end. So we're not that crazy, but I don't know.
So you're actually a good person for me to talk to because this is really interesting to me. So you've taught her to look both ways for cars and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is there a way that she could be safe if she knew what to do? I mean, or is that corner where there's a blind spot and nobody could possibly see a kid?
It's not her that I'm worried about. It's the adult.
No, I
Because what I'm
understand.
picturing is an Amazon delivery truck. The guy is late on his route, and he's texting, and he's pulling out of my parents. He's looking at his phone, and he's going fast around the corner, and she's all of whatever, 3.5 feet tall, rounding a corner, and it's not totally blind, but it's there's trees obstructing the view, so it's not for both ways.
Right.
But
No, so what I'm asking is, I can see the gears. And once again, once you can picture something in your head, it seems more likely. That's what we
sure,
were talking about
exactly,
before.
yeah.
Is there a way that she could be safe? If she was very good at doing this trip, is there a way that she could make sure, even if an Amazon driver was fast, that she could be on the lookout and know
Yeah,
what to do?
probably. Yeah. Yeah, probably. If instead of going on the road, she was just like in the grass the whole way, and then there's one part that you kind of have to go on the road because there's things blocking next to the road. But, if you got to that point and then looked, and if it was clear, went in. I didn't tell you the whole how much how close we all are. My brother lives on the same lane as us, and my sister's right across the street from us. So everyone's very
So
close.
great. Sounds
So like
fantastic.
walking to my brother's house, there's no there's no blind spot turn. And I think when she walks to my brother's house, I think I do watch. I don't follow her all the way up, but I do watch most of the probably half the way. I don't know.
It's interesting. So the whole idea of so Let Grow, which is the nonprofit that grew out of free range kids, um, our goal is to make it easy, normal, and legal to give kids back some of the independence to walk to a brother, an uncle's house or grandpa's house, or maybe the store, or maybe the park, maybe with your little brother or sister in tow. And from what I've seen in all these years of talking about the same thing, is that talking about it doesn't get you anywhere. Talking about it, you start imagining the Amazon truck, and he's high, and he's texting, and he's had an argument with his wife, and the dog has jumped out of the passenger seat and is biting him in the balls. Right? That's a tough the tough situation, and you've just imagined the very worst case scenario. Right? He's speeding, he's high, he's angry, he's texting. And there's something interesting about the way our brains have sort of become used to doing that now. That's what interests me the most. And I don't think we'll get to it today because I haven't figured it out in 17 years. How come my mom didn't go to that very worst case scenario that your mind automatically goes to? And it's not just you, it's all of America. We just did a study that found 50% of Americans believe that if they let their kid play at their park, age 10, 50% think that they would be kidnapped, likely to be kidnapped, which is so extremely out of whack with reality. I mean, it's off
Yeah.
by, if you wanted your kid to be kidnapped by a stranger, how long would you have to keep them outside unattended? And the answer is 750,000 years. So the idea that the minute you let your kid play at the park, they would be gone, or the minute your kid goes around the corner, they're going to be hit by the speeding Amazon driver. It's interesting to me that we go to these places so fast and it feels so normal. It feels innate. Of course, I'm imagining that. I'm not just imagining it, I feel it in my bones. How come we feel it in our bones now? And Tim did not feel that way sending you to walk to school or to the park or to the pool. And so I think what has happened, and the thing that interests me most, is this fundamental shift in literally how we think about life. And it's become really dark and it feels normal. And yet, the interesting study that was done on something called primals, which is your worldview, and this is what you're talking about with your friend saying, turn off the news. The more that you think that the world is scary, bad, filled with untrustworthy people, and you'd be a sucker to trust anybody because the bad things will befall you because you were Patsy and you were taken in. The more we give that worldview to our kids, and we do it out of love and trying to keep them safe and preparing them for the worst so that they won't get taken in. It turns out that there's this really long-term study, like decades-long study, that found that kids growing up with those primals do worse emotionally and health-wise and relationship-wise, and even earn less money than people brought up to default to trust. And I'm not saying it's just trust when you're talking about the Amazon guy, but
Yeah.
the sort of the more positive your outlook, ironically, the better your life becomes. And I'm not saying be Pollyanna. I'm not saying send your kids outside, dressed in black at night, without a flashlight to go around that corner. But I am saying that always thinking of the worst case scenario and always warning your kids about it, it might feel like you're helping them, but the long-term study shows no. But on the other hand, in the meantime, we've been infected with this fear. And so what did I want to say about that? The other thing that interests me, and we won't figure this out today either, because I still haven't figured it out, maybe you will figure it out, is I know you're framing things in risk reward, Reward. She gets to see grandpa. I get 10 minutes of free time, fresh air. She feels confident. And the risk is death. Happy, good, loves being outside. Death. You tell me which one is going to win in any of those risk reward scenarios.
Sure.
So what's interesting to me is that we're always putting death out there. And I don't think my mom did that. I don't think it was, no matter what they do on their own. What if she goes to ballet? She could be molested and killed. What if she walks to the corner? There's the Amazon driver. What if I let her wait at the bus stop? There could be a drunk driver. There could be a man in a white van. When we're always going to this worst case scenario, worst first thinking of the worst case scenario first, nothing will ever win. And so I think we almost have to stop saying, I'm making a very rational decision, risk reward. And a way to sort of get yourself out of that I don't think is ideal, but is one way, is to go risk. She's hurt on her way. Risk. She grows up thinking that she's in constant danger. She grows up anxious. She ends up feeling terrible about herself. She ends up cutting herself. I mean, I don't want to go to the other side thinking the worst case scenario, but there's no such thing as a no risk situation. And we keep pretending that if we keep our eyes on our kids, there's no risk, and we take them off and they're going to die.
This is where I think that trying to rationalize it, it's how my brain works. I think the rational way, though, would be to think about if you included like statistics or odds into it.
I got statistics for you. I mean, I really
I'm saying, like, I'm agreeing with you, because if I said, how many times have kids walked around to my parents' house, including me when I was a kid, they lived in the same house. How many times have we gone around that corner and not been hit? 100,000 times, let's say. And no one's ever been hit at that corner. So maybe because your point is, like you say, like death. But again, this is where it's all kind of convoluted in my brain, because I think what's happening, this is my guess, if I had to guess on the spot for you, and you know way more about this, but why your mom didn't think that way is the news and the media cycle wasn't reporting everything as doom, gloom, death, and despair. So your mom would only hear about somebody a kid getting hit by the car once every few years. So it wasn't a real threat. Where if I go on Google and type in kid hit by car, there'll be 100 results from the last month or 2 months, because it'll be pulling it up from all different states, maybe even different countries or whatever. So it seems so much more real than the stats actually are. When you just said how long it would take for a kid to get kidnapped, I know it's not a 50% chance in that scenario like that, but there's no way I would have guessed that long. I mean, so maybe the way for me specifically to fix my brain here is think about, yes, there is the chance that a car could hit him, but the odds are so statistically low, it's silly to watch, I guess.
I actually don't think that's what you have to do. I think there's something that's a little more direct. Tim probably knows what I'm going to say, which is that the only thing that I've seen that changes parents is their kids. My telling you statistics, you Googling statistics, reading books about statistics, calculating statistics, thinking about things rationally, making this risk reward, none of that, that's all in your head. And so nothing changes, because your mind always goes, but what if? That sounds great, but what if? What if there's 750,000, but what if, God forbid, it's my kid that one time, somebody has to be taken. So the only thing that I've seen that changes parents is letting their kids do something without them watching. And then the kid comes home and the kid is proud and you're proud. Just like, you have a little kid, you have a baby now. Like when your kid goes from crawling to walking, to toddling around, your heart is bursting, right? It's the greatest thing. I still can, my older kid's 29. I can still see him on the playground. It's like, wait a minute. It's like the superpower. He's walking. It was so great. So exciting. And after that, I never said, now you got to go back to crawling though. This is safer. You got 4 touch points on the ground. That was nice, but now go back. Because as hardwired as we are to worry, we are just as hardwired to be thrilled and excited and fulfilled when our kids start coming into their own. And so Let Grow recommends that all schools do what we call the Let Grow experience. It's free. It's like takes 15 minutes once a month. And it's just kids get the homework assignment that says go home and do something new on your own with your parents' permission, but without your parents. And they can walk to grandpa's house. They can climb a tree. They can go to the store. They can make pancakes for the family, depending on the kid, the age, the neighborhood, their interests. And what I've seen over and over and over is the most fearful parents. I did a television show too. I'll tell you to look it up after this. But everybody is excited to see what their kid could do. And that's what breaks the cycle. It's only action breaks the cycle. You know, you can twist yourself into knots and look up a lot of numbers, and there's no reason you shouldn't. But what really changes you is the thrill of recognizing who your kid is becoming. And there's no substitute for that. You got to let them go and then see the results. And if they screwed up, and if they twisted their ankle, or they got lost, or they were a little scared because there was a squirrel making a weird noise, that's fine too, because then they realize like it's even okay in that situation. So from what I see and what I hear from psychologists, only exposure therapy works. Exposing yourself to letting your kid, I'm not going to watch. I'm going to stay inside, not look out the window while you go to grandpa's house, and grandpa will call me or text me when you get there. That's the only thing that's going to make a dent.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's why schools should do the Let Grow experience. So we had, so it's in 1,000 schools now, and we keep hearing wonderful stories. You know, parents say like, you're a hero in our house, you know, or I can't believe it, my kid is dusting, or I had no idea she was ready to do this, I would have waited a longer time, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of excited parents. But now we have a psychologist who's studying independence as therapy for childhood anxiety. And the pilot study was extraordinarily successful. And now he has the money for a 3-year study, because when we've taken all that independence out of our kids' lives to make them safe, it feels like there's no trade-off. We're just keeping them safer. But the trade-off is internal in kids, because as we all know, when you're micromanaged, you feel anxious. Somebody's watching you. Somebody doesn't totally trust you. They don't know how good I am. Just let me do it. And when they see that the parents, who the people who know them best and who they love the most, trust them, that's a fantastic feeling for the kid. And then they start having this intrinsic motivation and intrinsic locus of control, internal locus of control, as opposed to external, somebody always watching and telling and helping and doing for me. And so if independence turns out to be this very important part of childhood that we took out of kids' lives, thinking we're just replacing it with more safety, what could be bad? And it turns out that they're drooping because it's like we took a basic nutrient out of their lives. Then all you have to do is give it back, and they start coming into their own.
It's good to know that you think it can come back. I was worried it might have gone too far. Lenore, do you think some part of overprotective parenting is about the parents themselves? Maybe a desire to feel indispensable?
I don't feel that it's the parents' desire to be important, really, that makes them so worried. It doesn't seem like that. Sometimes people say it's a desire not to look like lazy parents to other parents. So they feel like they have to do more performing of like, look, honey, I'm here. Don't fall. I'm watching you. Use your indoor voice and your left foot or whatever. But I really think it is, it has to do with the idea that it's not that you're indispensable. It's that if anything bad happens to your kid, it's your fault. And that, I think, it's not completely new, but it feels much more, much like we're in a bigger blame culture maybe than before, when all the kids were outside on their bikes in a big pack and some kid fell off. Nobody said, how come your kid was outside? Because their kid was outside too, right? And now it feels like we're being told that you can and must prevent anything bad happening to your kid, anything bad being. God, I was talking to a teacher the other day at one of the schools I was at, said that the kids had been making, I don't know, something, some kind of art project. And one kid accidentally got glue in another kid's hair. And the glue kid's mom called and was going to sue the school or I can't remember if it was harassment or bullying. It's like, you got to chill. You got to chill a little, right? But if everything is seen as either perfect or someone's fault, I'm not only worried that something bad will happen to my kid, quote unquote, but that I will find no sympathy or empathy among others, that they will say, well, if you'd been watching, or if you'd been there, or if you'd been tracking, or if you'd been paying closer attention, or if you were a better mom, you would be, nothing bad would have happened. So there's this assumption that childhood can be perfect, and that if it's not, it's bad, which is also not true. Nothing should be perfect. And that if something bad happens, it's your fault. So it feels like there's a fear of blame more than the sense of indispensability, I think, is what's driving parents crazy. But that's just me.
I see that. I think that's true.
Mhm.
I said this to Linda, who obviously connected us about youth sports, and I feel the same way about this. It feels a little bit like the Cold War, where everyone knows it's crazy, but no one wants to be the first one to put the weapons down. We stopped, like, with our infants. There's like a thing you can wear. I can't remember the name of it, but it like goes on their finger or their foot or something, and it tracks like their breathing, and an
The
alarm
owlet.
goes off. Yeah, and that's what I said to my wife. I'm like, we got it. We're not doing that. We have like a baby monitor camera that gives a notification, and we can hear it and all that stuff, and you can see and hear. But I'm like, we're not going to have it tracking their breathing. It's just our anxiety would be through the roof.
Well, I'm glad you recognize that. I mean, what you're saying is that having more information would actually make you more anxious.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know I don't know where like I've said to my wife, and I've talked about, my parents had just for me and my siblings, like the baby monitor you could hear, but you
Yeah,
couldn't
we
see
had that
anything.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was normal, right? And now everything is you can see and hear. And I think that's actually, I think that brings me more comfort, because when I hear crying I'll use a different kid, one of my sons, I hear crying and I can see that they're totally fine. Versus like one time one of my sons had his foot like
Stuck in
through
the
the
crib.
crib and was kind of stuck. And so I ran up and helped him. But other times he's crying just whatever. And I know he's fine. I can leave him, and, I know he's okay. I'm going to go back to sleep. So I think like that's an example where I think more information actually helps, not hurts. But tracking breathing or something like sleep cycle, that seems like it would just,
Yeah.
it would drive me nuts.
Yeah, it does drive people nuts. Also, there's a lot of false alarms, and so nobody gets
That's
any
the
sleep,
thing.
as if they were
Yeah.
already getting enough sleep, which they aren't. So, what you're saying, though, is that it basically is a convenience that means you don't have to go in and look, but it's basically just looking at your kid, right?
But I think it's, yeah, but I think it is, but what's the way to say it? If I go into my son, if my son wakes up and he's crying, he's in his crib. If I look at
Well, if you
him,
go in, it might make noise, and then he wants to
yeah,
get
if I
up. And
go in,
yeah, yeah,
he's
yeah.
gonna
That does
go.
sound better. That does sound
So
better.
that's why I feel like, but at the same time, if I could hear like he's crying, maybe in my brain, I'm thinking of like, for you guys with our, you guys with your kids, when you could hear the crying, you don't really know what they're crying about, and versus like I can see in
Yeah,
two
no,
seconds, I'm like,
that sounds convenient. Yeah.
yeah,
But
it
it's
feels,
interesting that so you figured out for your own sake that like seeing if they're caught in something makes sense, whereas registering every breath and their pulsometer and their blood oximeter and their movement
yeah,
levels, which is what the owlet checks. What the reason I sometimes do talk about the owlet, and I'm so glad you rejected it, is because it is a device that's being marketed to the average parent. That would have normally been used only in the neonatal intensive care, right? To check all these
yeah,
vital signs because the child is really, very fragile. And so it's to me it's a great analogy for what our culture is doing to our trust in our kids on every measure, because you're taking a kid who is has been fine enough to go home from the hospital, and then is in their crib, which is a safe and secure place, and at night when you need your sleep, and instead you're being told that the baby is in such danger that you better be monitoring them all the time on all these metrics. And so what the culture does is it takes a very normal, safe circumstance, which is a kid in bed at night, and turns it into a life or death situation that you must monitor very closely. And I think that's what we've done with all of childhood. It's like, it's just a walk around the corner. Well, you better monitor it. You better see it. Oh, it's just a day at school. Well, what if they got a B- and I don't know, and I don't find out until the end of the week, or God forbid, the end of the semester. It's this assumption that your child is always on the precipice of being hurt one way or another, falling behind, being bullied, getting hit, by a car or kidnapped. I mean, it's really rewriting the entire experience of childhood as one of constant precariousness, and that the only way to keep them from falling off that cliff is you paying constant attention to every metric possible. My friend sent me, it's sometimes hard for me to find this on my list. Maybe I don't know if any of your kids are in daycare, are they? Or preschool?
No, they go to like camp things, but not daycare.
Okay, well, I'm just going to read you. This is a preschool. Where is it? Pre-K. Oh my God. Why can't I find it? Anyway, that's terrible. Where'd it go? Her kids pre-K would send home a notice every day that told her, 9:23 a.m. P, 10:28 a.m. P, 12:05 p.m. P and BM, and 2:22 p.m. More P, and it's sort of like the owlet. It's like, if your kid was, had just had renal surgery, you would probably want to know, are they peeing again and how often? And,
Yeah.
But otherwise, first of all, who wants to be a daycare worker if you're writing down the pee schedule of 20 kids in your class? And then secondly, why am I getting this information? Why is it important or relevant? It's not. And yet we get used to this new level of precision and observation that makes us think, well, it must be important. The school's sending it. Would you go to a school that, my school sent home the P schedule, yours doesn't?
Yeah.
Mine's good.
That's what I'm saying with like the Cold War stuff, where people are like, oh, that school, that daycare's doing it, we better do it too.
Right. And then there's a camera in the corner and it's watching everything. And this is where your friend's analogy about not analogy, but actual advice about don't watch news is sort of like, don't watch anything that closely, because if you tune in and you see your kid is in the corner and they're kind of sad for a minute, you've caught 30 seconds of the worst minute of their day. And now you think that your kid is, hates school, and maybe you hate the teachers, and maybe you should pull them out, and maybe it's time to get them evaluated, and maybe it's time to get a tutor. And it's like, why don't you let them come home? And if they're like consistently miserable, then you try to figure out what's going on. But to just always be checking in is going to give you a lot of disturbing moments, because nobody's happy every single second, and nobody's playing and creating and singing. So the more you know, the more you have to worry about. Or as they used to say, ignorance is bliss. Or as the Bible said, she ate from the tree of knowledge, so did he, and suddenly they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden because they had too much knowledge. Too much knowledge equals unhappiness.
I think there's a tension in all parents between protecting kids and preparing them. So what do you think? Where do you draw that line, and how do you know when you've gotten it right?
I don't know where you draw that line. I don't know when you've gotten it right. But I do know that it's really good to notice that there is, there's the yin and the yang, there's protection and there's preparation. And here I will go to the ancients, which is that the saying that's been around forever is that don't prepare the path for your kid, prepare your kid for the path. And anytime you can see yourself doing that, do it. Prepare your kid for the path. I used to get Parents Magazine. Parents Magazine is now just online, and it still drives me crazy, but it doesn't have the pictures and everything that I used to love from the old one. And one of my favorite articles from parents was just tips on what to do when you're raising your kid. And Troy, it said if you take your kids to a friend's house, be sure to bring some shoelaces with. Why?
I don't even know.
My favorite one was somebody who commented, "What, so you can hang yourself?" But no, the answer was the answer was so that you can tie shut their cabinets, the other person's cabinets.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right, but that's the idea of the preparing your, the world for your child instead of preparing your child for the world. So I'd say, you know, just ask yourself sometimes, is this preparing them? Do I think they're ready? And that's why you don't even know your kid is ready until you step back. And sometimes, I mean, that's what the Let Grow experience tries to do, is shows you your kid is ready, because off they go to do something new on their own without you, as prescribed by their school. But sometimes you find out they're ready because, like, I was once giving a talk at a school, another school, and I don't know how we got on this topic, but one of the teachers said that when she was like 7, the dog ran away. And both her parents went running after it to try to get it. And that meant that she was left at home with her little baby brother, who was in a high chair. And they didn't come home for a while. And she thought, like, well, I guess I got to feed him, And so she started feeding him, right? And then they still weren't home. And it's like, well, I guess I'll take him out of the high chair and I'll change his diaper and I'll play with him. And that day, I mean, she's remembering it 40 years later. And it was so extraordinarily significant to her, because it's when she saw how much she was capable of, and when her parents saw how much she was capable of. And she said that feeling of caring for another child and being helpful and competent was what made her a teacher. So, there's the tension between preparing and saving your kids, but sometimes they're way more ready to be part of the world, and we're surprised by it. You don't have to wait for your dog to run away for that to happen.
I don't know why it is, but I just know for a fact, you hear it all the time, and I'm living proof. My first kid, the level of craziness versus the second went down drastically, versus the third went down drastically, versus the fourth. It's like, we joke that with my daughter, it's like we knew every single what food she had, what time she had, the schedule, that, and then with like the 3 boys, it's just basically been like survive.
Right. Oh, he's right. He's eating the dog. That's okay. Right. They'll both survive. Yeah. No, I mean, what you're getting is this reality check. At the beginning, all you have is a lot of advice and products and, sort of third parties. And by the time you have your 4th kid, you have your own reality, which is that your kid survived this, your kid survived that. You weren't watching this one while this one did it, and it was all okay. And I think one of the most pernicious lies that our culture tells us is that our kids are really fragile. And by the time you got 4 of them and they're running around and one of them is, dragging the other one by the diaper, you realize, like, if we were that fragile, the species wouldn't exist, right? So one of the things to keep in mind is that when you treat kids as fragile, you're sort of making them fragile. And if you assume that, like John Haidt, who I work with, always says that there are things that are fragile, like if I dropped my cup, chances are it would break. And then there are things that are resilient, like a rubber ball. You drop it, or this rubber band, you drop it, nothing bad happens, nothing good happens. But then there are things that are called anti-fragile. There are systems that are anti-fragile that actually need a little tension and a little strife to become strong and to become resilient. And one of them is the immune system, which I'm sure you're learning by the 4th kid. Yes, they can eat that potato chip that fell on the floor, right? So the immune system needs exposure to germs to get strong, right? And then bones, and I'm the worst person to show this, I'm like the most spindly person around, but bones need, if you want to build up your bone mass, you do tension, exercises. What is it? Resistance exercises. And then there's the ultimate anti-fragile system, and that is called a child. And as much as they need our love and our protection and our care and our feeding, they also need, to be frustrated sometimes, or to not get what they want, or to be mad, or to overeat, or to eat the wrong thing. I mean, they just need all sorts of good and bad experiences, not horrible experiences, not abandonment. We're not talking about that, but just some fear and some frustration, because then that becomes part of who they are. And just like the germ, like your immune system fights off germs because it's learned how to do it, you learn to deal with like, okay, my brother's driving me crazy, but that's okay. I'll do whatever. So trying to get rid of what my friend, the psychologist, calls the 4 Ds, which are distress, danger, discomfort, and whatever the other D is, I'll never remember. Those things, you can't try to get them out of your kids' lives because then you're creating a fragile system. So to create anti-fragility, you have to assume that they're not fragile and then watch what they can handle.
Lenore, I know we've spoken a bit about your family, but at the end of each podcast, I invite all our guests to brag about their family. What do you say?
Oh, that's so funny. It's actually something I don't like to do for this reason. If things were terrible in my family, that would seem like, boy, Lenore knows nothing. And if things are good in my family, it seems like, oh my God, she's the perfect guru. She did it right, and we should do exactly what she does. And I feel like I got an N of 2. I just have 2 sons, not 4. Wish I had 4. That's so lucky. So I can't brag about them, but I will say that they are fine. They're fine, and I love them.
Let me give you a curveball then. If you were on an elevator with somebody and let's pretend you were on a podcast and you're running out of time.
Imagine.
And somebody said to you, what are the 3 most convincing reasons why I should let grow with my kids?
First of all, I love that you found out the connection, because we were originally going to call ourselves Let Go and Let Grow. One is for your sake. Your tension will go down, just like not watching the news. Watching everything that they're doing is actually making us more worried as opposed to less worried. That's the big lie. The more we know, the calmer we'll feel. 2 is that they will see that you trust them. I mean, that's really the wind beneath anyone's wings, that somebody who knows you and loves you believes in you. If you're with them all the time and watching them all the time, they know that you love them, but they don't know that you trust them. And the 3rd reason is because I said so.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid-fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
It might have been when I first met my husband, and he was so funny. It's like, oh, yay.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
I have no adversity. I'm like the most privileged person on earth. I can't even say like it. I have like no adversity, nothing. Feeling tired in the morning and waiting for my coffee to brew. I mean, really, I have like no complaints.
Well, when that article came out and you were getting slammed pretty hard, that's adversity, right? Or no?
That was adversity mixed with a lot of, fun. I was at the middle of a cultural phenom, and that was not bad. I mean, I've lost a lot of jobs. That's been horrible. I've lost every job I've loved, and maybe I'm about to lose this one. That's been bad. We've had disappointments in our family, but adversity is really something that I feel like other people have so much more of than me.
What are you most excited about?
Oh, right now, and this will sound so solipsistic, but I have a TED Talk coming out, and it says everything that we've said, except it says it in 10 cogent minutes, and I'm wearing a very sparkly jacket. And you have to like memorize your whole speech and practice it for 3 months and get critiques on it and this and that. And it's good. I'm excited that people will see it. It's an easy way to share me.
Next one is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
To my younger self? Oh, start flossing a lot sooner. I don't know. Right. Maybe drink less coffee. Figure out how to stand up straight.
What book recommendations do you have for us or for the listeners?
Books that I loved or books that I think are helpful?
Let's do one from each. How about?
All right. Helpful books. I'm going to give you a couple. It's 3 of the 4 founders of Let Grow have all written books, so I would recommend those. Mine is Free Range Kids. Jonathan Haidt wrote The Anxious Generation, and Peter Gray wrote Free to Learn, and I like them all. But for fun, like for a really fun book to read that I just loved so much, read Dear Committee Members. It's just the letters of a grumpy professor at a mediocre college somewhere in the Midwest, and you get to know him and his students, and it's a work of genius. Dear Committee Members.
That
If you
sounds
read it,
good.
just drop me a line. Say, "Oh my God, Lenore, I couldn't stop
Yeah.
laughing." It's so great, and it's one of three. It's part of a trilogy, and the last one is just as good.
It's funny. I should have known this, but I didn't. But my wife is actually literally reading The Anxious Generation right now. It's just like 3/4 the way through it.
So
So yeah,
is like
small
most of
world.
America.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
popular
right.
book, right? When she
Yeah.
gets to the chapters on for schools and for parents, I helped write those, so those are great.
Oh, cool.
So is the rest of the book, of course.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah. Don't blame yourself for feeling nervous or worried in a culture that is trying to make you feel that every single second of the day because they've got something to sell or something to make you do or buy or want or take or read. And it's hard swimming upstream when there's a culture, when you're just swimming upstream and the stream is fear. It's a culture that's really toxic that way. And I salute you for any headway you can make.
Awesome. Lenore, before we wrap up, the last question I ask, and this is how we met you. So
The last question of the last question of the last
yeah,
question.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But this is how we met
My
you. So
wish is for three more wishes.
it's how we met you, though. So I have to say it. At the
Yeah.
end of every podcast, I ask our guests, now that you kind of know us and the vibe of the podcast and all that, who are a couple of people that you know personally you think we should try to have on the podcast?
Well, he's busy writing a book, but Peter Gray is fantastic. He's the one who wrote Free to Learn. He's the one who convinced me and then John Haidt of the real importance of free play and just kids figuring things out on their own. And it's a Free to Learn is just a fun book. I read it on vacation. I never read nonfiction. And to read nonfiction on a vacation tells you something. It's great. And so you'd have Peter Gray. And then I would also recommend this woman named Maggie Jackson, because she's ahead of the curve by 15 years. She's so smart. 15 years ago, she basically wrote The Anxious Generation then. It was called Distracted, the end of attention and the beginning of the dark ages. And she was really getting what our phones were going to be doing to us before anybody else. And then 2 years ago, she wrote something called Uncertain, about how having certainty feels like it's comfortable, but it actually just shuts you down. You stop being curious, you stop getting information, you start being smug. And if we can be comfortable with uncertainty, including the uncertainty of your kid going around the block and you not seeing them, then the world opens up to us. So I think that I'm hearing more people start talking about uncertainty as something that's sort of dying on the vine now that we've got our phones and we can check everything any second. But uncertainty turns out to be a really important part of life, too.
Lenore, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I wish we had more time. It's been fascinating to hear your perspective, especially in a time when so much of society seems to be moving further away from the kind of free-range parenting style that you champion. I hope parenting can come back to a more present and enjoyable experience for this and future generations. I also hope God continues to bless you and your family.
Well, thank you. I'm hoping that, I always feel like there's two things going on at once. One is that they're moving away because we have all this certainty and all these ways of checking and the constant trade-offs that we don't want to make. But I also feel like this message of the importance of independence and how freeing it is and how foundational it is for the kids and for the parents, I feel like that's getting out too. So we'll see who wins.
The pendulum always swings back and forth. I think it's on. I think it's on the way back towards your side. I hear people talking about it now more. I never heard anyone say it, whatever, even 5 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
And now I hear like young parents. I don't have a huge demographic that I'm pulling this
They're
from.
all
But
related to you on the block.
yeah,
Right? Anyone who isn't shares your
that's
X
half
and
the
Y
reason.
chromosomes. Right.
Yeah. But I think it does seem like with my friends who have young kids, it seems like people are like everyone's kind of getting sick of how crazy it is. But hopefully, fingers crossed. Thanks so much for coming on, Lenore. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Greens.
All right.
Bye-bye.